Welcome to Tough Talk. I'm your host, Paul Taros, and today my guest is Terry Whitney. Terry is a precinct delegate, a board member of the North Oakland Republican Club, and a candidate for state senate for the 12th district. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you.
What cities does the 12th district cover?
Addison, Oakland Township, Bloomfield, Bloomfield Hills, Kego Harbor, Clarkston, and there's one other in there I'm just passing up at the moment.
Well, that's a pretty big area.
Yeah.
Is that traditionally a Republican district?
There's also Southfield and Lathrop Township, which are more leaning towards Democratic side of things. But yes, traditionally the northern side of the district is Republican.
Okay. What is your background?
I'm an IT, right now an IT executive in the automotive industry. Before that, I was an IT executive in the marketing industry. So it's a good 2+ decades of IT work.
Okay. You're running against several opponents, including 2 seasoned legislators, Mike McCready and Jim Tedder, who both have served in the State House of Representatives. Why should somebody vote for you for state senate?
Simply put, if you look at their voting record, they're running as Republicans. That's a shame. One of them, McCready, for example, if you line up his votes to, say, any longstanding 3-term Democrat, they're almost in line. In fact, there's 4 people that are currently running, again, in various districts that McCready is in line with the Democratic Party. Jim Tedder only has 1 person, but nonetheless, Jim Tedder has helped raise taxes on us. I mean, why would you want that?
Okay. So what are some of the major challenges facing the state of Michigan?
Our infrastructure is a mess. There is no transparency in our government. I couldn't begin to tell you what the price of a pen in Lansing is, and neither could anybody else. There's no accountability whatsoever from us as a citizen to our state. We can't tell you how many public employees the state employs, how much the average state citizen makes, or where our tax dollars are actually going. Instead, they print a 235-page PDF report that only gives you summaries. You can't get details, so you don't know if a department's just paying 2 people $500,000 to be there or what they actually do.
How would you change that?
Well, the first thing I want to do is audit our state. There's a process called Lead Sigma 6. It's worked effectively in the automotive industry. It's worked effectively in other forms of government. Texas has used it. It's where we would go through a step-by-step process and actually look for waste and areas where we can improve. We could then go ahead and create a report, a public report that would be like, here we go, folks. Here's what, this department actually has 284 employees, of which 130 of them might do exactly the same job. And maybe it's time to transition those folks elsewhere.
Okay. How would you reform the state's auto insurance to bring rates down?
Right now, we have a no-fault industry. Just changing the nomenclature to fault would drop our rates dramatically. We reward criminals. We reward people who don't have auto insurance whatsoever. If we switch the auto insurance, just a few lines in our auto insurance law to, if you are at fault in an auto accident, then your insurance covers it, where if you are not at fault, your insurance does not cover it, we would save thousands each year. There are many other states, Oregon, Washington, Texas, California, where the the driver is not penalized for being a bad, being a good driver, where bad drivers are penalized financially for being horrible drivers.
Okay. Well, I remember when they switched to a no-fault state here, And one of the selling points was by not having to determine fault, you would eliminate a lot of the lawsuits. Under your plan, going back to a at-fault basis, aren't we going to see an increase in lawsuits?
Well, insurance companies suing insurance companies, I'm really not too worried about. I highly doubt we're going to see a number of lawsuits because it ends up being, well, the person was texting behind the wheel. They slammed into the back end of another vehicle. That's the number one cause of auto accidents in America right now. I mean, it's about as plain as it gets on who's at fault in that instance. Sure, somebody could pick up, the phone and hire a lawyer and sue, but it's not going to go anywhere.
Okay. What would you do with the Michigan Catastrophic Claims Association?
It should be turned into a public fund. Right now, it's an annuity for private insurance companies. Instead of allowing this gigantic bubble of money that we don't collect income on, that only benefits less than 0.0001% of Michigan residents, either make it optional, disband it, or just actually start collecting income on it. If we even got 1% of our interest rate back on it, it would be millions of dollars a year.
Okay. Now, I would think the insurance companies, they kind of think that that's their fund. So you might have an argument from them.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Okay. Under Obamacare, Governor Snyder expanded Medicaid under the Healthy Michigan program. Initial projections were that it would cover 320,000 people. Today it is covering over 660,000. This program is costing $4 billion a year, most of which is being paid by the federal government. But this year the state will be paying $200 million, and by 2020 the state will be paying over $400 million. What do you think we should do with Healthy Michigan, if anything?
We're taking money that is allocated by the federal government for a federal program, and then why is Michigan picking up the tab? A card for and Medicaid and Medicare, and most providers do not take. The ones you do may not necessarily be the greatest of healthcare physicians. I mean, bless their hearts for taking it, but nonetheless, it's a very limited form of insurance. Insurance is not medicine. It's just a discount card for some ability to get some form of care. We need to change that. Do I have the answer to that? No. But there are better ways than here's a little card for a discount for medical care that is sub-rate. In 2005, the National Health Service Industry did a study with the state of Oregon where they tried determining whether or not Medicaid patients and non-Medicaid patients had better outcomes because Oregon State has a lottery-based system because they don't have the funding for medical care. What they found out after the conclusion of the study was patients who had Medicaid and patients who did not have Medicaid had roughly the same outcome within a 0.01%.
Wow. I would not think that would be the case. Obviously, our roads, infrastructure are crumbling. What do you think we should do about our infrastructure?
Our infrastructure is a mess. We have nearly a $55 billion a year budget, of which, as I stated earlier, we have no clue what we're actually allocating it to. We're losing money. Every day that the transport comes to the state, that loses a tire, gets stuck in a traffic jam, we lose money. The automotive industry loses money. The whole state loses commerce because of it. So the first thing we should do is it's going to cost roughly an estimated somewhere between $2 and $5 billion to fix our roads and infrastructure. That should be our priority.
I think the legislators are going to say, well, we don't have that kind of money. Where would you take it from? What departments or?
Well, we have all kinds of funding available that just doesn't happen to be what we're actually spending our money on. We have an economic development corporation funding. We have tax credits for everybody except small business. We have a bloated government that is probably spending somewhere on the order of $2 billion a year that's mismanaged. Streamline it, we'll find the funding.
Okay. Would you be open to any tax increases to fund?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
One of the things we have a real problem with, and I personally have a problem with, especially to my opponents, is they believe in tax increases are the way to grow the economy. The Trump tax cuts have grown the economy significantly in a very short period of time. GM, Chrysler, Ford, they're handing out bonuses. They've never been able to do that because we dropped the tax rate. The income tax should be zero in this state. Our property taxes and our pension taxes should be zero in this state. Even if we cut them in half, we could guarantee we'll see double or if not triple the returns.
Okay. Do you think we need to make any changes in how we construct our roads?
I don't know the answer to that. I think we should study. I think we should send a commission out and figure out which state has the best road or the best road system, and look at them to see what they're doing versus what we're doing. I mean, right now I couldn't tell you what's the difference because I'm not a civil engineer.
Okay. Currently, road contractors have to warrant their work for 5 years. Do you think this is a sufficient period of time?
I think it would be a sufficient period of time if we actually had a warranty check system. I mean, Senator Colbeck, now gubernatorial candidate Colbeck, has actually commented that apparently there's no legislative trail or paper trail on who's building the roads. So how can we go back and actually even get a warranty on a road and claim damages when nobody knows who those people are?
Okay. Let's talk about Detroit. Over the last several years, we have seen Michigan taxpayers pay hundreds of millions of dollars to help Detroit go through bankruptcy and to bail out Detroit public schools. Do you think Lansing should have done this?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. Now, the argument is if we didn't bail them out, Michigan would be on the hook for a lot of these pension costs. How would you respond to that?
The city of Detroit is an economic mess. They take 10% of everybody's income on top of state and federal taxes. The first thing I would have done if when they started restructuring that is demand that be cut to zero. And the reason is that is a inhibitor for various young folks or anybody who even wants to invest in Detroit or work in Detroit, actually go to work in Detroit. You find IT folks, I mean, the rent center is filled with them, that go there and they're like, okay, well, you know what, I want to work here. And like, then they hear about the city tax, and then suddenly nobody wants to work there, or they want to, earn more because they don't want to be hit with that tax. It's very cost prohibitive to do business in Detroit because of it.
Okay. Over the weekend, I watched the Detroit Superintendent of Schools and the head of the Detroit School Board blamed Lansing and the governor for the district's poor test scores. Since the district has been under emergency manager control for the last 10 years, how would you respond to them?
The best way to look at it is, and it wasn't too long ago, it was a little over 4 years ago, there was a major scandal. Apparently $2.5 million worth of school supplies were stolen by a superintendent and several teachers down in Detroit. big news article. So if you want to see what's going on with the schools in Detroit, I mean, that's a starter.
Okay. What are your thoughts on Common Core?
It's horrible. It's absolutely one of the worst ways to educate an individual. It's designed to create somebody who doesn't necessarily think about the right answer, who just thinks about creating an answer. It's not a form of education so much as a form of brainwashing.
Okay. Are our schools adequately funded?
Here's the real trick with that question. No matter which, if you said, look, you know, if you went to a school board today and said, are you adequately funded? And they'll always say no. And then you ask them, okay, what is the dollar amount you need to be adequately funded? They can't give you one. We spend over $9,000 per student in this state to send them to school. We could send them to private college in West Virginia for that. And I guarantee they'd have a better education than what we get. And part of it is bureaucracy. Part of it is, you know, the various curriculum, Common Core, that the state has signed on to. And part of it is the teachers and the superintendents and the school districts aren't allowed actually to teach what they should be teaching.
Okay. So how would you fix our education system?
Our education system should be based upon the individual districts figuring out their own education system. It shouldn't be Lansing dictating on how somebody else should teach their children, because quite frankly, what works in Lansing doesn't seem to work for West Bloomfield. What works in Clarkston may not work in Milford, and so on and so forth. Let the local parents decide and teachers decide which way they want their kids to learn. Let the students figure out how they want to learn it. Let the teachers implement it.
Okay. Sri Tanadar, Democratic candidate for governor, wants to put an end to for-profit charter schools. What are your thoughts of that?
I don't see why he would want to do that. I mean, some of the better educational schools in this state are private schools. There's one not too far up from where we're taping right now that is a great school.
Okay. Sri also supports single-payer health care. Would you support him on that or not?
Absolutely not. London, Canada, half the civilized Western Europe has single-payer health care, and it's a disaster. And for the progressives who like to point out Sweden as their golden ticket, why single health care works, it's also a disaster. I have friends in Sweden. They'll tell you, you wait 3 months. If you want to go see a doctor for anything, you'll wait 3 months. You'll eventually go, and your taxes are 85%. But if you actually get critically sick, you better be dying before you go to the hospital. Otherwise, they'll walk in, they'll look at you and go, okay, come back tomorrow.
Okay. In 2008, they capped energy choice at 10%. Do you think that's the right amount, or would you increase that?
I would increase it. The reason being is that a free economy generates more jobs. It also generates lower cost of goods delivered. Right now, there's no real choice. We're on there's 2 basic electric grids in the state, and that's it.
Okay. Now, some people say, well, if you increase competition, it's going to destabilize the market. How would you respond to that?
Look at Texas. It hasn't destabilized Texas. Texas' economy's on fire. They have 9 choices, depending on what city you're in.
Okay. In recent times, we've seen a lot of protests on college campuses over certain speakers, being allowed to speak, and a lot of students saying no, this speaker should not be allowed to speak. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first, it's sad. You're going to a higher educational system, a school, to be challenged. These kids aren't being challenged. They're not even being remotely challenged. I mean, to hear something that you may not necessarily like, maybe it spawns another idea. Maybe it will change your way of thinking. But just protesting as a knee-jerk reaction, what's the point of going to school for that?
Okay. There's a civil asset forfeiture bill, House Bill 4158, introduced by State Rep. Peter Lucido, which would prohibit forfeiture unless an individual is actually convicted. What are your thoughts on that bill?
That's due process. I mean, why are we even debating this is beyond me. The war on drugs, which is there was a war on drugs back in the 80s. We still seemingly are fighting it today. That's the reason why there's a bill in place to combat that. The problem is that it's been misused. And if you haven't been convicted of anything, then you should not have your assets taken one way or another.
Okay. House Bill 5060, introduced by State Representative Jim Runstead, would disclose the names of companies getting multi-million-dollar mega Michigan Economic Growth Authority payments. Would you support that bill?
Absolutely. Reason being is that why is our government not transparent? Those are our tax dollars. It's ludicrous to sit there and think that, well, I can't know what my state government's doing with my money. And then in a year from now, the state government will come back and say, well, we can't fix the roads. We can't help the elderly. We can't, build community centers. Their electrical grid's a mess. We can't do that, but we've helped out these corporations.
Okay. In 2007, Governor Granholm and the legislature hiked the income tax from 3.9% to 4.35%. This was to be temporary, with rates dropping gradually starting in 2011, and we're to be back at 3.9% in 2015. What's your thoughts on that?
It should be zero. The unfortunate part is that we have a representative who's represented West Bloomfield, Mike McCready, who voted against tax relief. He was one of the 12 Republicans in the state to vote against lowering our income tax to like 4.035%. When in truth, the bill should just be lowered to zero. We want an economic boon in the state. People are complaining about jobs. People are complaining, that we're losing a lot of, federal deductions. Make it zero and watch the economy go on fire.
Okay. Well, now, I've asked Representative McCready why he voted against it. His response was he wanted to see spending cuts to offset the loss in revenue from the decrease in income tax rates. How would you respond to that?
First, there's something called the veracity of money, which is the economic proven theory that if you take $1, in 60 days, that dollar has changed hands at least 10 times. So in the state of Michigan's case, our sales tax will have hit that dollar 10 times, or 60 cents out of that dollar will have become revenue for the state. You don't cut back government by just hoping that it magically happens, because every person in government will tell you, oh, their department's the most important department in the world. What you do is you say, okay, look, we're making funding cuts. We're taking away your funding. Now you figure out how to go ahead and make the adjustments appropriate. Lansing has the idea that, well, you can't make a funding cut whatsoever, because all these different things will upset somebody, upset a lobbyist. Maybe they won't get reelected, which is only a 2 or 3 terms at most item. Instead of taking a position of, no, I'm not going to tax you. No, I want a better community. It's, well, what am I going to do to make sure I get elected again? So I say we cut everything that we can possibly cut and then let the state figure out how it's going to improve it. And I guarantee you, you cut the taxes, our revenues will go up, not the opposite. Worked in Texas, worked in Tennessee, worked in North Carolina.
Okay. Well, if we reduce the state income tax to zero, how would we replace that lost revenue?
Sales tax. Our sales tax is at 6%. We will be on fire within a year. In 2 years, our state income, our taxes will have actually doubled because the amount of throughput we've put through the state. People seem to think that just because you take, we're going to take $8.5 billion out of the economy, out of Lansing's budget, which is basically saying we're going to put $8.5 billion back into the pockets of businesses and people. Well, the state still takes sales tax. People still buy things, and now with that more money, they're going to buy more things. More items, more services get purchased and sold, and that generates more revenue. It's basic economic theory, and it's why the Trump tax cuts worked so well so quickly. It's why the stock market is on fire.
Okay. So you're saying if we reduce our income tax to zero, our sales tax would increase more than enough to
Our sales and services in the state will easily be doubled
Okay.
in 2 years' time.
Okay. Well, with that, we'll wrap it up, and I want to thank you for taking time to appear on the show.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Best of luck to you.
Appreciate it.